Welcome back to part 3 of the ABC Murders and our librarian's challenge to guess whodunit. We're covering chapters 21 through 33 in this section. So far, there have been 3 murders. Now, in this final stretch, can our librarians figure out whodunit? So in this third section, the peculiar figure of Alexander Bonaparte Cust seems to make a prominent appearance. What do you make of this peculiar character?
Well, so there's a lot that happens, I think, from chapter 21 to chapter 33, especially with Alexander Bonaparte Cust. So there's a sort of a big reveal in 21 that Thora Gray was indeed talking to someone at the Carmichael residence. She recalled, oh yeah, I opened the door and I talked to this guy who was selling stockings, and I completely forgot about him. He was very, just forgettable. And so then we go down this trail of stockings.
I think that one of the things that we find out is that he is not a person who's remarkable or memorable. So like Erin was just saying, it's not like Thora was deliberately hiding that she came in contact with him. It was just, he was a nobody, so it didn't even hit her consciousness that she should be aware of him. So I think it's definitely someone who is unremarkable, who you wouldn't take notice of. And then like Erin was saying, the stockings seem to be a big clue into perhaps how he is interacting with people.
Yeah, to follow that up, it was interesting how, because when we get towards the end, it seems that though he is a patsy, which I'm really interested to see towards the end how he was selected. But it seems as though he was hired by a fictitious stocking company and had all these things mailed to him and has been set up to appear to be the killer. Because frankly, I don't think he has the mental capacity to have actually planned all this based upon some of the interactions.
Alexander Bonaparte Cust, at least I believe at the end of chapter 32, maybe 33, believes that he killed all 4 people. To me, it's a question of why and who planned it. Like you just said, he seemed to be sort of a blunt instrument, if you will, to get the job done. But I don't understand the motive that he would have. I think it's other person or persons who wanted the murders to happen.
Yeah, and I think a challenging thing too is that he has large areas of his memory that he can't recall. So obviously there's some confusion there.
And I don't think he had anything to do with it besides being convenient. I think he is suggestible, has memory problems, which makes him very convenient because he probably was injured in the war or something. And I'm wondering why the murderers chose him out of anyone in order to do this. Was he just convenient? Or was there some revenge conspiracy where we're flame framing this guy?
Do you think that Alexander Bonaparte Cust committed the murders or is just being framed for them?
I think he's just being framed for them. I don't think he actually did any of these murders.
And I agree with that because I think just based on the different chapters with the not Captain Hastings narrative, you get a little bit of is this really the guy,
So he confesses to the murders. He is imprisoned. Of course, Poirot is trying to get to that motive, and he has a lot of doubts that he shares, and that leads, I think, a lot of us to also doubt that, even though the public's opinion is that, this is the guy for sure.
So none of you think a split personality could be in play?
I didn't get that sense.
For me, no.
So have there been any clues to lead you who you think the murderer is behind ABC? And now we have a D.
D was interesting. I don't actually remember the name of the victim. I did not write it down, but I did write down Mr. Downs. I think Mr. Downs is very suspicious. Also, Lily Marbury, who find out that Alexander Bonaparte Cust he's a lodger, and he is renting the room from Mrs. Marbury, and her daughter, Lily Marbury, calls Alexander Bonaparte Cust to let him know that the police are coming for him. after her lover rats ABC, Alexander Bonaparte Cust, out to the police. So that was extremely interesting to me that she was like, heads up.
It was interesting to me too, but I think she likes him.
Yeah, I think she has a soft spot for him.
I think she has a soft spot for him. Whether just friendship or more.
Yeah, and I think after the murder in the cinema, that's when I was starting to feel like, okay, Mr. Cust is not the killer, because again, you see those pockets of memory loss. You know, he came out of the theater, he was so happy, you know, and then he gets home and notices there's blood on the cuff of his sleeve. He has a bloody knife in his pocket, and his first thing was like, I didn't do it. And then he's trying to figure out what happened to his memory and the time. So that kind of was like, all right, something else is going on. Somebody else is involved.
Right. But we also saw that he has epilepsy.
Yeah.
And goes into seizures. So it would be very convenient when he's having a seizure of some kind to do that, to slip him the knife, to get some blood on him, especially if you know where he's going to be, because conveniently.
List of the addresses he's going to visit.
And he immediately wanted to go to the station after he found the knife in his pocket and the bloody sleeve. So then I was thinking, okay, yeah, this is not the person. This is not our guy.
I believe they found the weapon like behind the hat stand, or I mean, somebody thought they were being clever, but I don't know how clever it was. Somewhere I would say obvious.
Before we get into who you think might be behind this, just give a little bit more specifics about the fourth murder and what you think might be important about it.
So Poirot receives a letter, as he did the previous times, indicating that the fourth murder would take place in Doncaster on the 11th of September. And there's a lot of time between when they receive the letter and that date. But they find out that there's a race happening, I believe it's a horse race, at St. Ledger, the St. Ledger race. And so a lot of people are going to be in town.
So the fourth murder happens in a movie theater, and the witness sees someone get up and stumble as he's moving past them and drops his hat onto the seat before him, and then goes to pick it up. And the person who he leaned over next to is the one who was stabbed. And his name is George Burlesfield, and he's stabbed in the back. So the ABC was found on the floor by his feet. So the question was, did he skip a letter? Did we get the order wrong? What's going on? And the witness sitting 2 seats away was named Roger Emmanuel Downs. Supposition is that we stabbed the wrong person. Much different than the previous murders. Stabbing someone in the back in a crowded movie theater, there's a lot more that can go wrong in that scenario, as opposed to hitting someone behind the back in their store, strangling them on a beach, or, hitting them behind the back when you're walking in the moors or whatever it was. You know exactly who that person is, whereas this case, there's how many witnesses in this theater, and something could easily have gone wrong.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is the difference with this murder, is it seems more sensational because it's done with a place where there's lots of witnesses.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why they think Mr. Downs was the target is that he's dressed similarly to the man who was killed. To me, that can be manufactured. You can identify your victim and what they're wearing that day and try to get as close as possible. I don't know, I'm very suspicious about that.
Anything particular about that scene that strikes you?
You would have to plant the ABC, and I think the guy who found him could have done it. I think Downs could have done it.
When the witness is questioned, Crome mentions that he's suggestible because he was able to plant some thoughts into his head as he was questioning him as to what this person might have looked like and kind of skew things a little bit. I also thought it was interesting that Crome would try and manipulate that situation like that, because generally you want your witness to be as untainted as possible if you're the police. You don't want to offer them suggestions as to what they might have looked like.
I read that more as he was just doing that because I think he knew that the guy probably didn't see everything that needed to be seen, and perhaps it wasn't going to give him accurate information. That's kind of how I
don't know, but
it.
I mean, if you look at any of the police procedurals, you want your witness to be able to identify the suspect. If you're giving them other information, you've now muddied the waters, so they can no longer give you an accurate description.
So, looking over the whole picture, all 4 murders, Are there any clues, any thoughts as to what might lead you to guess a particular person as being the culprit?
For me, no, not after the fourth murder. I was more confused than I was confident, like after the third murder, and then I got really confused after the fourth. I was like, okay, Cust is not the man. So
why were you confident after the third, but not the fourth?
I felt like there was more. I felt like Christie gave more supporting clues and dialogue that kind of led me to believe that this was the murderer. And then it kind of just, that went out the window, I feel like.
So for me, the whole thing with the stockings, I'm like, oh, I should have picked up on that. I think it was mentioned in I remember it for the V. The fact that I didn't pick up on that means that I feel like I'm not picking up on other, things that might lead us in the right direction. Thora Gray keeps coming up. I don't know. Hastings is sweet on her. Poirot knows it. She's going to be a confounding factor. I don't think she did the murder.
Any motives that seem apparent to you for any of the murders?
I personally still think Chrome's responsible because of the convenience of him being involved in everything. Granted, he's the inspector that was assigned, but he seems to be a glory hound. He has beef against Poirot. Some of his actions, like in influencing the witness, I feel is very suspicious.
There's certainly things that I can add to it with my experience and knowledge that Christie hasn't suggested at all through the book. I know that stockings were rationed during the war, at least in America, and so does the stocking connection and the fact that Alexander Bonaparte Cust was in the war have something to do with it? There's just stuff that I can add again to kind of flavor what I think is going on, and I don't know if that's helpful at all. I know that we've noticed some of the women deciding to move to the city. I think Mary Downs did. I know that Megan Bernard had recently moved to the city, and Thora did a little move, so I feel like there's something there. Yeah.
Yeah. I do think one of the women is involved.
Yeah.
Personally, I lean towards Thora.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say so much I have a motive in mind, but definitely with the letters and everything, it shows that the murder, this is premeditated and really thought out. And the clues that we got from Cust with his epilepsy and his lapses in memory, yeah, that's kind of what I said earlier, kind of threw my initial thinking that he was the killer out the window. Because they're two very opposite things, being so premeditated with these thought out letters and places where the murders are going to happen and the alphabetical link, and then you have a man who can't remember, has huge lapses in memory of what he's done. So those two don't link up together for me.
So then who do you think did it and why?
Honestly, I don't know.
No.
I know it has to be at this. Just from my own knowledge of reading lots of mysteries, it's usually a very minimal character that you wouldn't think of. But the minimal characters that we have, none of them for me, with the exception of maybe Thora, who's kind of a little bit suspicious, is poking out in my brain as who could be the killer. I don't think it's Crone. I don't get the vibe. He's got some, issues with Poirot, and he's very eager to prove himself that he's a know-it-all. But I don't get a vibe from him that he's the killer. Not at this point in the investigation.
Gosh, if I have to point my finger, I think Mr. Downs is the killer, and I think he's actually Lily Marbury's beau in disguise, and I think he's trying to get women to move to the city so that he can be more of a playboy.
I already said I think it's Crone, and I'm gonna lean towards Thora Gray as an accomplice. I think I said that last time too.
Okay.
We're all over the place, Brian.
It does feel like throwing darts at a
moving.
dartboard.
Yeah.
We have our guesses from our panel, and it appears that Agatha Christie has stumped them. We're going to take a brief break and have our librarians read the final 2 chapters to learn the truth as to who done it. They should have taken a little bit of a closer look at the B murder. And, more importantly, murder C. We're back with the denouement to the ABC murders.
Ask us who done it, right?
So, now that you know who done it, what are your thoughts?
So it's Franklin Clark, who is the brother of the man who was murdered in the C murder. And it sounds like he did it for the money in some ways, but then came up with this elaborate plan to sort of needle in the haystack this one murder to kind of deflect the blame onto Cust.
So he was the mastermind. So like when Nan's suggestion earlier about that there was 2 people involved in these murders, you were right, but
totally
wrong about the people who were involved. So
Yeah.
I was very surprised. I did not suspect him at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I didn't suspect him at all either, and I probably should have. But I was very focused on the oddities in Chrome's behavior, some of his digs and things like that, and remarks that I should have overlooked.
Yeah, and like Poirot said, the whole thing, like this kind of all started with the letters, and I guess going back now that he said, his reasoning is behind the motive, now that you go back and like look at those letters, you're like, yeah, these were not probably written by someone who has epilepsy and who has large chunks of memory missing, and they're very methodical and thought out. Hindsight's 2020.
The key was to try to consider each of the murders individually to look for who would gain by the deaths of those individuals. Obviously in A, there really wasn't much. There could have been some personal motivations, but not really a strong motive.
The thing about A is that her name was plastered on the door frame above her shop. And so when Franklin Clark was looking for victims, it was like, oh, well, there's an Asher right there in Andover. She was so easy to pick. And then Betty Bernard was easy to pick because apparently Franklin Clark is a flirt and easy, kind of the opposite, where he can sort of get intimate with women quickly. And so Betty seemed like the right type for him.
And that was another key point, was the belt was Betty's belt. So how did the killer get her to basically take it off? By being someone who was charming, which Alexander Bonaparte Cust clearly was not, and also is suggestive of the killer being a man as opposed to a woman. Her murder would seem to be a motive for crime of passion, of which there was a couple suspects, but then there wouldn't necessarily seem to be a reason for those suspects to have committed the other murder. But then we come to C, and there's a very substantial financial gain. And with Franklin Clark clearly realizing if he were to off his brother, he would be suspect number 1. But if his brother was part of a series of murders, he would be less looked at or figured to be part of the overall picture.
Especially if he's sending letters to Poirot, first of all, kind of fingering Cust.
He's trying to deflect attention away from himself so that he can get away with this elaborate plot to basically murder his brother, but it's like, let me get these other people in on it too, so it doesn't look like it's just me who's wants to murder my brother.
Yeah.
And one key clue that I believe all of you sort of missed was the letter for the C murder going astray.
I have a sticky note.
You have a sticky note.
That's why I laughed.
Because for a very methodical person to be doing these murders, to make such a mistake for that particular murder that the letter was delayed, kind of brings attention to that particular murder as to why was this one so important to get done so that the letter was astray. So they didn't have an opportunity after already having had 2 previous murders. There was no way for them to prevent the third one. So the killer clearly was trying to make sure that one happened. And one way to do that was to make the letter go astray. And as Perot points out, you can't have a letter go astray to Scotland Yard, but to a private address, you can. Thus, how Perot's involvement comes to be in the case overall.
And I think the sort of the methodical nature of A and B, and then this sort of slip up, but not in C, and then just like the sort of haphazard nature of D, like it just felt like D had to happen because we did the one that was important. Now what do I do for D? And Poirot's like, you could have stabbed anybody in that theater, you know.
The more important thing being that Cust was around
Yeah.
in the vicinity to be able to be targeted as, oh, we're going to finger him as the killer. So there you have it. Our librarians, all 3 of them, stumped by the queen of mystery, Agatha Christie. We hope you all have enjoyed the ride in trying to figure out Agatha Christie's The ABC Murders along with our librarians. Many of you might find that you want to read further and read more Agatha Christie titles if you haven't already. Many read Murder on the Orient Express, And Then There Were None, or Death on the Nile as being some of Christie's best-known works. I would also offer that you might want to consider A Murder in 3 Acts, Death Comes as the End, and Towards Zero. All of them are fine works by Christie that are sure to challenge your little gray cells. Hopefully we'll see you all sometime in the future for another Librarians Try to Solve Agatha Christie.